Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video. And welcome to the premiere of an idea that I've been tampering with for the past few weeks, in which I've been looking for a way to talk and discuss about football in a more quick fire and more in-trend way, rather than me sitting and talking for 20 to 30 minutes about a particular player, manager, tactic, tournament. Why not talk about what's going on right now and talk about players, managers, tactics in a more quick fire and discussion tone? Football is constantly changing, and I felt like it was more adept in today's environment of football, in which there's so much going on, there's so many games every single week, that it would be better to create an environment where I can create videos quick fire and talk about different things happening at different times. The result of that idea is the new series that's going to be called Football Fanatic, in which I'm just going to discuss and briefly talk about different players, different managers, different tactics that somewhat interest me, and how they interest me, and what I feel like is going to look like moving forward.
Oh, he's done it near post! Lamine Yamal!
The teenage wonder kid makes all of the difference!
In today's premiere, the first thing that I wanted to talk about was Lamine Yamal. Lamine Yamal, 16 years old as of now, recently 16 years old, just at the end of the year of last year. He is proving to be the only shining light in a very dim season in Barcelona. He is notching up goals and assists at a crazy level for a player of his age. I believe he has 12 goal involvements in less than 2,000 minutes in La Liga, in all competitions, not even in La Liga. He's featured in the Champions League. He's gotten assists in the Champions League. He's gotten goals and assists in La Liga. I remember very recently he was the main contributor in a 3-3 draw at home to one of the worst teams in the league, and if not for him, we would have definitely not gotten anything out of that game. I remember him making his debut against Betis about a year ago, towards the end of the season after the league title was basically wrapped up, becoming Barcelona's youngest ever player to play for the club. And since then, you can see the progression in his play. Sometimes when I watch Lamine Yamal, especially recently with the unfortunate injury to Rafinha, Lamine Yamal was given a huge opportunity to stake his claim. And ever since then, he hasn't looked back. Even with Rafinha returning back into the fold from his injury, Lamine Yamal is still the main guy on that right-hand side. And why wouldn't he be? He seems to have already understood the way in which professional football is played from academic football. He's noticed that defenders are always going to be a lot more physical with him because he's so technically good on the ball. And he sort of glides across the field, makes the right decisions, and is constantly giving his defender something to think about. We don't see it a lot nowadays with wingers who are constantly keeping defenders on their toes, constantly trying to make something happen. But Lamine Yamal, at 16 years old, 2008, is doing things that some players in their late 20s aren't even doing. And he's doing it for one of the best teams in Europe, albeit Barcelona are not in the best form right now. But if Barcelona can actually hinder his minutes and can actually focus his attention in the right places and not allow his head to be turned or allow his focus to be skewed, we could genuinely be seeing one of the best players in the world for years to come. Now, I'm not saying that he's going to be the next Messi or he's going to be the next Ronaldo, or I'm not even saying he's going to be as good as Kylian Mbappe. But when you watch him, you have to sit back and genuinely think that this kid, hopefully, fingers crossed, there's no injuries or any diversions in his focus, this kid could go right to the very top. And I don't even say this just being a Barcelona fan who's biased and rooting for their own players, because that's what a lot of people do. They're biased towards their own team's youngsters. But Lamine Yamal, just like Ansu Fati a few years ago, could be one of the best players in the world in 4, 5, 6 years to come. And that's only if the club keep him safe, protect him from injuries, and don't allow his head to be skewed by the wrong things. I watch Barcelona for 3 reasons. 1, Lamine Yamal. 2, Frankie de Jong. And 3, what else am I going to do during the weekend? Now we travel from the northeast of Spain to the northwest of Italy as we move from a young, exciting, promising, surprising footballer to a veteran-filled side in Inter Milan. I'm not coming here with any new information that those of you who actually tuned into Serie A wouldn't know, but I just really wanted to talk about this Inter Milan team. I watched them nigh on every single week in Serie A. There was a time in the season in which it felt like it would be a 2-horse race between themselves and Juventus. I remember watching the 1-1 draw at the Turin Stadium, a game that was filled with so much quality. There was so much jeopardy, and it felt like both teams would rather escape with a draw than go out there and put themselves at risk of losing the game. And it's not a recent trend for Inter Milan to be as good as we have seen them to be this season. Those who watched their run in the Champions League last season, which many people belittled to the fact that they only played against lesser teams such as AC Milan and Benfica, those same people forget that they came out of a group of death with Barcelona and Bayern Munich in second place, picking up results against Barcelona home and away. So this Inter Milan team definitely knows how to fight it out against the best of the best in Europe. Pair this with their domestic dominance, and Inter Milan's success and form this season can be attributed to how well drilled this team is. They're so difficult to beat, and they make a league like the Italian Serie A, which is no easy league, albeit it may not have the funds and the quality and the resources that a league like the Premier League has, but it is still a league that boasts some of the best players and managers in European football, and is not a league that should be sniffed at. They are currently sitting 10 points on top of the league at this point. They concede next to no goals. They're the best goal scorers in the league by a fair margin at that. I mean, what's there not to like? This team is one of the best teams to watch in the league, probably behind Thiago Motta's Bologna, which is a video for another day. But the way in which they build up is so unique. Their 3-5-2 formation is one of the most tactically adaptable formations in the entirety of Europe. That 3-5-2, the foundation of that seam system, is created by the likes of Bastoni and De Vrij and Darmian and Augusto, and these players are the springboard, flanked by DeMarco and Dumfries, who are probably the two most dynamic fullbacks in all of Europe, and how they're able to get forward and support the defenders, both to a very similar level. And every time I watch their defense, I'm just in awe as to how structured and methodical and how planned everything is. The patterns of play between the defenders, the way in which their center backs spread out and create passing lanes, which allows you to move the ball forward, the way in which the wing backs both support by creating that width, as well as creating passing options for the midfielders and the attackers going forward. That link between their defense and their midfield is what gets them to bypass so many different opposition threats, whether it's a high press, whether it's a mid block, whether it's a low block. Sometimes you even see when Inter Milan are attacking teams, their center backs will make overlapping runs ahead of the wing backs who will sometimes tuck inside. And there's just so many different ways in which Inter Milan's players and defenders and midfielders can take advantage of you. And from the defense, you look forward into the midfield where you have Hakan Çalhanoğlu and Henrik Mkhitaryan and Nicolo Barella, who is honestly one of my favorite players to watch in world football. They are all just so flexible in the way they play, and you can see that is coming from the manager. The manager instills this flexible play, as we talked about in the defenders, that's also present in the midfielders. Hakan Çalhanoğlu recently talked about how he is one of the best, if not the best, regista in world football. Regista, deep line playmaker, whatever you want to call it. And who can talk against him? You look at the performances that he's been playing and the performances he's been dropping for the last, I'd say 10 to 18 months for Inter Milan. This is peak level of football. Henrik Mkhitaryan, a player who we thought was finished at Arsenal and Man United, has found a new lease of life, albeit he isn't the fastest player in the world, but he's still cooking up numbers that not many players in Europe are doing. And as I said, Nicolo Barella, Rolls Royce. That's all I have to say. Rolls Royce of a midfielder. And when you then move on to the attacking areas of the field, where you have Alexis Sanchez, Lautaro Martinez, Marcos Thuram, Marko Arnautovic, these are all not superstar players on the face of it, but in particular, Lautaro Martinez and Marcos Thuram, you look at the partnership that those two have developed in the short time they've been together. And in particular, I want to talk about Lautaro Martinez, who has adapted his game for 3 different players in his time at Inter Milan. Now the captain of the football club, and rightly so. He has been scoring goal after goal after goal, all while adapting his game to different striking partners. Marcus Thuram, now a strong runner who's able to run the channels, who's able to be a target man, who's able to be physical and get in behind. Lautaro is now playing that second striker poacher role. And then before that, you had Edin Dzeko, who is a natural traditional target man who was able to play little man, small man with Lautaro. And then even before that, you had Lukaku, who was like a combination of Edin Dzeko and Marcus Thuram, a player who can run the channels at times, or at least when he was at Inter Milan, and then can also hold the ball up for Lautaro Martinez. Lautaro Martinez is essentially the embodiment of what this football team is. how flexible and how adaptable they are to opposition threat, and how they're able to change the way in which they play to take advantage of the opposition's weakness. And I look at the ideology, not just in Inzaghi, but across Italian football as a whole, in which the back three is seen as this safe haven, this fundamental that you fall back to if everything doesn't work out. And I've always wondered how well could it be adapted and played across Europe, whether it's in the Premier League or in the La Liga or in Bundesliga. And I support Barcelona, and we've never been associated with playing a back three, but it's always been something that I've thought of and something that I've always felt could be utilized if done properly. Ultimately, you do need two very, very, very good fullbacks, which Inter Milan do have. Now, top quality fullbacks are not easy to come by nowadays. We've seen that Bayer Leverkusen, Xabi Alonso's Bayer Leverkusen, they are flying in the Bundesliga with a back three, and that's because they have two of the best fullbacks in Europe. But if it is utilized properly, and if the right personnel can be found to fit the roles that are in a back three, then I think that it can be something that could be utilized in the future to dominate football all around the world. From the champions-elect in Italy, we move on to the champions of Africa. Newly crowned champions of Africa, Ivory Coast. It was a final that fittingly ended a tournament that was filled with great moments from start to finish. It was a game and it was a tournament that really opened my eyes to African football as a whole. Obviously, Nigeria being on the losing side, it didn't distract me from the great things that we did in the tournament, such as watching Ghana get knocked out in the group stage, beating South Africa, and beating Angola on our way to the final. The final definitely was not our highlight of the tournament, but it also should not be seen as the be-all and end-all of what happened in Abidjan. You move from the collapse of the perennial winners Egypt to Congo on penalties, four-time AFCON winners Ghana crashing out in the group stage at the hands of Cape Verde, who would go on against all odds to make it into the quarterfinals. The dethroning of then champions Senegal in a drama-filled shootout, Cameroon's comeback against the Gambia in stoppage time to qualify for the knockouts in the last game in the group stage, Mauritania's famous win over 2019 winners Algeria, Angola's fairy tale story as they danced their way into the quarterfinals before they were beaten by Nigeria, DR Congo somehow reaching the semifinals only while winning a single game in 90 minutes, or even World Cup dark horses Morocco, who ended up getting knocked out in the round of 16s at then underdog South Africa. And how can we go about and not talk about the champions of it all, the Ivory Coast? Ivory Coast sacked their manager. They sacked their manager before the knockout stages because they believed they were not going to take part. They believed that there was no way after their 4-0 defeat at the hands of Equatorial Guinea at home that they were ever going to take part in the knockout stages. Yet due to favoring results, they somehow found their way into the next round. And as they went into the next round, it seemed like everything aligned perfectly for them. They went on and beat the reigning champions, Senegal, in a crazy penalty shootout. Before then, in the quarterfinals, scoring a 90th minute goal to take the game against Mali to extra time before scoring a 120th minute goal to beat Mali as both teams picked up red cards. And then you move on to the semifinals, in which they swept aside a DR Congo side that had been imperious throughout the tournament. Or even the final in itself, in which they came back from 1-0 down to inspire a comeback through Frank Yannick and Sebastian Haller, who topped an incredible tournament and an incredible year for him as he's battled back from cancer to win his country silverware for the first time in almost 10 years. What's there not to like? I mean, this tournament, not only did it have so many great narratives, but there were incredible moments that only Africans can sometimes create for you. The moment with the manager pouring water on his head, the crazy reaction by the manager on the sideline as he saw his star player miss an incredibly important penalty, or even the player who played a little 1-2 with his teammate before blazing the ball out for a throw-in. This tournament was what African football is all about. African football has always been seen as lesser than every other football across the world. We've always been ridiculed and to an extent lied upon by big media sources across the world, creating narratives to make it seem as though African football is nowhere near where any other country or any other continent's football is. Now, albeit we don't have the resources that Europe has, we don't have the history that South American football may have, but we definitely have the exact same passion. And albeit we may not have the quality that European football has, but we definitely make up for it in passion. And I felt like this was the first AFCON tournament in which most of Europe and most of the world were taking it seriously. It felt as though broadcasters were actually taking their time to cover the tournament. It felt as though people were genuinely analyzing what was happening at the tournament. It felt as though people were actually invested in AFCON. What a tournament for them to finally take notice, because this is one of the best AFCONs that I've ever seen, and one of the best that I believe many people have seen in their lifetime. It was a tournament that just showed the world what African football is all about. A tournament in which players are out there representing their country and proving to the world that you can beat anybody. Whether it's a Ballon d'Or player playing for Barcelona or it's a player playing in the Nigerian league, any player can beat anybody if you have enough passion and enough mentality about you. And it really made me wonder whether we're going to see any progression in the African game. If you can see teams play the way in which they did this past tournament, why not invest in the game? That's always been the problem in African football, whether teams can genuinely be invested in, whether FAs will take it seriously and actually try and improve their countries in a footballing landscape. Unfortunately, for most of us in Africa, corruption runs deep, whether it's in the government or it's in the footballing association. And until we overcome that obstacle, maybe football is not where we should be looking. But for the 3 weeks in which we had it, the 3 weeks in which we were able to sit down and watch our country and represent our country and sing that national anthem and support those 11 people representing our people, it felt like all our problems went away for a bit. And that's what I love about football.